Hello, I'm Helen Del Judas, the curator of exhibitions and collections at the Miller Art Museum in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. This is the third edition of the Studio Door. Today I sit down with gallerist and painter Kendra Bulgrin. In 2015, Kendra, with her partner Jimmy Eddings, opened the James May Gallery in Algoma, Wisconsin. The James May had the goal of representing contemporary works of art and craft by both emerging and established regional artists. They also aim to assist first-time art buyers to initiate their collections, as well as assisting experienced buyers to enrich their already established collections. Along with running the gallery and raising a family, both Kendra and Jimmy are practicing artists. Jimmy's an accomplished ceramicist, and Kendra's a painter with an incredible new series of works that we're going to find out more about today. So I'm now joined by Kendra Bulgrin. Kendra, welcome. Welcome to the Studio Door.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. I think this is going to be a real fun conversation between us. So I want to start by I want to kind of start at the beginning. Tell me about, your development of moving into the world of art, your college experience. How did you decide to become an artist?
Yeah, well, I grew up in the country. My mom was a weaver and my dad worked in a tractor plant, so we were very blue collar, but my family was still very supportive and really, really were great about me being an artist. I think I've always wanted to be an artist, and I was always either outside playing with animals or, in my bedroom drawing and painting. And so after taking art classes in high school, I went to Japan for a year to study art and culture. And then from Japan, I went to study at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater for, I think it took 5 years to get my BFA and an individualized minor in Japanese cultural studies. That's where I met Jimmy Eddings, my partner. It was in a painting class, and my professor at the time wanted me to start painting larger. So he said, hey, this guy has a truck. He can help you go get wood. And then it was all, that's where it all started. So, oh, hi Java. Studio pets.
He wants his moment in the spotlight.
Yeah, so after I got my BFA at Whitewater, I went to the Memphis College of Art and studied painting and interdisciplinary arts there. And then I followed my partner to the University of Kansas, where he was getting his MFA in ceramics. So then we spent about 5 years in Kansas, and I was teaching at random colleges and trying to make a go of it in Kansas. And then I became pregnant quite unexpectedly, and it was all going very smoothly. And then we found out he had a heart defect, and we decided we needed to be closer to family. So then we kind of put the dream of having a professor on hold, and then we went to Wisconsin to be with family and try to get our kids' health taken care of. So we kind of bounced around a lot in those early years, even in Wisconsin, until everything just started to feel like it was out of our control, like our kids' health issues, this job that was never materializing fully. And so we decided, okay, now is the time. We need to do something. So we started looking up in Door County for a possible studio / gallery. I've always been drawn to those really neat barns that, get turned into studios / galleries up there. And we found we couldn't afford a thing. And then our friend who owns Clay on Steel in Algoma, Jimmy had an artist residency with them. And he said, well, you need to look at this building next door. It's amazing. It's inexpensive. And we looked at it a few times, and we finally realized we could turn the back area into our living space and then turn the front area into a gallery. So we bought the building in, I think 2014, and then it took us about a year to renovate. So we lived in a 2-bedroom apartment upstairs with our family of 4 and our dog at the time, and renovated downstairs. And it took about a year, and we gutted the whole entire thing. We did 90% of the work ourselves, and then James May Gallery was born. So it
That's a lot
was
of work.
a rocky road getting there, and a ton of work.
That's incredible. So, you opened the gallery, but you actually have 2 gallery spaces at this point. When did you open the second gallery?
Well, we got this crazy idea. We were looking at real estate again. I always get like a bug to be looking at real estate. I'm constantly looking. So we were looking again for maybe some acreage or, a farmhouse again. And we just couldn't stomach it. After paying so little for the commercial building, we couldn't think about like paying so much for, a place in Door County again. And then we showed a friend the post office property that was a block away, and it was being used as a church, and it was in a little bit of rush shape. There was drop down ceilings, fluorescent lighting, carpeting. So we saw it though, and we saw this. They had this big open space for worship, and we were like, this would be a perfect art gallery. So then on a whim, we just decided to buy that too and start another gallery. We thought it would become more of an event space and a place we could show a little bit more challenging shows along with larger pieces of artwork.
Yeah, and for people who don't know or haven't been there, it's a big, huge, wide open rectangle with
3,000 square
high ceilings. It's a beautiful space for showing artwork.
Yeah, I think that we did that 2 years ago, so that's been up and running about 2 years.
Yeah, and you show a lot of mixed media pieces there, sculpture, along with painting, right? Because you have the space to do that there.
Yeah, and we've had video premieres there, parties, all sorts of different little events.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's empty.
And now it's empty.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get into that in a little bit about the changes that we're all going through, in museums and galleries. But I'm really curious. I wanted to hear about your philosophy. I really love this idea that you're representing both emerging and established regional artists. And I wanted to hear about your philosophy as a gallerist and how you choose, why you choose who you choose to represent.
Yeah, I feel like I've always just had a really, really sharp, keen eye when it comes to artwork and design. So I think becoming a curator just came really naturally to me. And the first space we had, I think it was about 1,200 square feet. And I really became interested in how to meld the 2-dimensional with the 3-dimensional. So we were doing a lot of shows with like 2-dimensional artists and then incorporating a 3-dimensional artist. And usually it was a ceramic artist just because of our connections with my partner. We're in ceramics.
Right.
So it was a goal of ours too, to have a really good balance of emerging artists and then established artists, hoping that the established artists would help kind of like thwart the careers of the emerging artists.
Sure.
And I want to support women artists. I want to support minority artists. I really, really believe in that. And I think, emerging artists, they need the support more than established artists.
Absolutely.
And I mean, the gallery, I never set out to really make money at or make sales. I feel like that was just kind of a great thing when it did happen.
So that was sort of a secondary priority to actually just giving a platform to these artists. So I know that even before the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown, the James May Gallery was already going through some transitions, that you had some sort of new challenges on your agenda. And then of course, the COVID-19 lockdown, right? So how have things changed? What was that initial plan that you had, and what are you having to adjust to now?
what happened in the fall was my son got a new health diagnosis that was a little more serious. So we decided to move the family closer to Milwaukee to be closer to the children's hospital and closer to my family and my partner's family.
Mhm.
So I think that was a really good move because now we're on some acreage. The boys have room to roam. My studio's as ideal as it used to be, but I think I'm managing. So the plan at that time was to run the gallery remotely. We still have an intern. She was keeping the gallery open until COVID happened, and then we shut the gallery down because we didn't want her to be at risk. We didn't want, any of us to be at risk.
Right.
So now we're running the gallery solely online. All the programming's gone online. We're using Artsy, and I found we've actually expanded our collector base just by me focusing more energy online. And we've been thinking about, I've been really trying to be sensitive about what people need and want right now. There's so much negativity on social media. There's so much negativity in the news. And I've been through it in my life, and I really just try to focus on those, even just minor little beautiful moments, as cheesy as that sounds.
Right.
But I'm really trying to go about it, and I don't want to just be shoving things down people's throats or, just buy this, look at this art.
Right.
So I'm trying to create content people will want to read, and whether it be the studio lives of the artists we represent, little studio snippets on our Instagram stories, or we have an artist blog that's been really popular where it's just 12 questions, and I just switched out a few questions to make them more relevant now with COVID, because I think artists, they're still all working alone in their studios.
Right.
At times it can be really, really hard to keep going. And I know a lot of artists, including myself, it's been, a lot of highs and lows in the studio where, sometimes you really feel like working. Sometimes it's just the weight of everything is just so crushing. So I've been trying to just get different stories out there that people can relate to, and positive things and beautiful things.
And I really like what you just said, that sometimes that artists are alone in their studio. This is the condition of the artist, and that the weight of things can get so crushing, or just life gets in the way. Do you feel like as a painter, you really need that clear space, that clear space of mind and time? It goes back to a room of our own, right?
It's hard as a mother. It's hard, and then just through all this transitioning has been difficult. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a spare bedroom right now, and
Mm-hmm.
I can kind of retreat when the kids are watching a movie or something, or I try to get in little snippets of time. But again, with oil painting, it's hard. I would love to have long stretches of time where I can work, especially the way I work. It's all wet on wet mostly, and I've had to switch that up a little bit. I'm doing a little bit more glazing and a little bit more slower processes.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of lend themselves to shorter snippets in the studio.
Because you find yourself being taken away from the painting for longer periods of time. You can't get back to it while it's nice and fresh and wet.
Yeah.
So I want to get more into your painting, but I have one more question for you about the gallery. I know that your gallery has also offered internships for many years, pretty much since the beginning, right? And you've had some really interesting interns over the years. Are you hoping to continue to be able to have interns?
Well, we're putting that all on pause right now. We're trying to rent out some of the real estate we have right now just to make ends meet through all of this. And then we hope to be able to offer some type of residency or internship in the future, because I think both Jimmy and I, as former teachers, we're so passionate about mentoring younger artists. I think if we could keep doing that, that would be amazing. We've had some really amazing interns through the years that have really taught us a lot, and hopefully they've gotten a lot of the experience as well.
Mhm.
And a lot of them are in grad school and doing really amazing things themselves. So that's pretty exciting.
And what do you look for in an intern? How do you choose who you choose?
I try to look at my own weaknesses and try to complement that. And, over the years, I feel like I kind of know what I need. I need someone to kind of keep me on target and organized. So that is a definite plus if they're really organized. Um, we would always bring the interns into our home, have dinner with them. So they had to be, they had to like kids and like dogs and, be okay with like kind of a live work situation, which I think it did work well in Algoma because I mean, Algoma in the winter, there's there's not much happening. So we definitely had our own little nice group that we would social.
Perilous too, that if they don't have to like be living one place and traveling down county roads to another place, makes that a lot safer for everybody.
We would give them living space in exchange for 20 hours a week. So we would take care of all their expenses in exchange for them working for us. And that was always a really good exchange.
Mhm. And so now you said that you guys have recently moved to Milwaukee. Am I correct on that?
We're in Dousman, so we're about 40 minutes west of Milwaukee. So it's nice. We looked all over the suburbs and I couldn't do it.
Can do it.
We're back in the country, which is really nice. The Kettle Moraine Forest is not even a mile away, so it's beautiful. I thought I would really miss the beauty and nature of Door County, which I really, really miss Lake Michigan. That has been an ongoing thing within my work and within our Art of Water show. So that's been really hard to leave behind. I have woods here and the forests, and that's been really, really nice.
Hmm. And your space now is just one of the bedrooms in your home, your studio space.
The spare bedroom. I feel like I've been really good at making use of space throughout the years. We had an old cabin in Perry, Kansas, where it was just like an old canning kitchen I was working in with no air conditioning, nothing. I would paint in my underwear. It was so hot and miserable, but my paints were practically melting. But I was like, no, I have to paint.
You got to do what you got to do for the love of art, right? You don't just suffer for beauty.
No, I don't care about that.
That's so. Tell me about this new series of paintings because I just absolutely adore them. And in spite of your lack of time and everything, you're actually being incredibly productive on this series. Tell me about the inspiration for this series.
Um, well, I feel like I've always had this pressure on myself to make really conceptual work. I mean, outside of grad school for the last few years, I've really put pressure on myself. Like this painting has to mean something profound. Like it has to have some other kind of conceptual meaning. So I was working on those miniature pieces for quite a while. And then I think when I moved to Algoma, I started transitioning more to just the landscape and more abstracted landscapes of Lake Michigan, and taking the miniatures. For a while I was taking them into the forest in Door County and then photographing them. And then I thought, well, let's just get rid of the miniatures, let's get rid of the figures, and why can't it just be the landscape? I never allowed myself just, what's wrong with being a landscape painter? But I think it's a little more than that too. Like, I think I still try to put a lot of emotion and a lot of, I don't know, a lot of the pieces feel a little dark to me. There's still like an emotive quality to them. And I never really have interest in just copying from a photograph. They're always a little bit, like I try to put something a little more magical into them.
A little bit of fantasy of your own. Yeah, because the work that I first saw by you, of course, were forest scenes with small animals, deers, does, with these sort of plastic figurines of like children's toys that were sort of placed in the atmosphere. And they are very, very emotional and emotive. And I don't use the word dark as much as I use psychological about them. And so there's a real shift in what you're doing by removing that figure. There's a different relationship. The figure with the animal in the forest scenes always sort of has this feeling of connection and disconnection between the animal world and the human world for me, right? You're there, you're both there, but there's something that just doesn't relate. And in these paintings with the landscape, there's just a very, very different feel by removing that, by removing that figure. Is that for you?
Mhm. It was really hard to get away from, but I think it's headed in a good direction.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could, I would just I kind of joke with Jimmy, like I would be happy just painting landscapes all day, or like just the water, the sky. I'm so happy doing that, especially now. Like I hardly have any time to paint with the kids, with the running the gallery from afar. And it's so hard for me. Like, I just want to get in the studio and paint. And it's like, well, I'll just figure out what it all means later. So I'm sorry, I can't tell you exactly what everything means right now, but it's just not even a huge concern, which it will be tomorrow. I'm putting up a show at the Platt Gallery at the Sharon Wilson Center for the Arts. And yeah, then I'll have to like throw together an artist statement quick, but I'll have to worry about that later.
Do you wait till the last minute on those? I usually wait till the last minute on those myself.
Yeah, because it's the last thing I really want to do, and I don't have time to process it all as I'm doing it. I mean, I'm kind of thinking it through in my head, but I think it helps to have the whole body of work done, see it all together, see it all up on the wall even, and then kind of write.
Yeah, there's a certain magic that happens as a curator. You know this very well, that, at that last second where you have it just the way, where everything's up just right, and a certain magic, it really comes to life in a whole nother way than you even imagined in the beginning. So tell me a little bit more about the new paintings. So how are you beginning these paintings? Where are you gathering your information from, your inspiration from? What is your approach when you stand in front of an empty blank canvas?
Well, I'm in nature a lot. I go on a ton of hikes. When I was in Algoma, I'd go to the beach every day and look out at Lake Michigan. And I just take a ton of photographs just on my iPhone. And then I take those photographs back in the studio and just spend some time looking at them and processing them and see what kind of catches my eye, catches my heart. And then from there, I kind of edit them a little bit more and draw them out on the canvas and then start painting.
Mhm.
And have, I usually have the photographs up as I'm painting and for reference.
So are you free drawing these from looking at the photograph, or are you using like projection or any?
A little of both. I use projection sometimes. On the bigger ones, I don't, just because it's impossible in the space I'm in. And yeah.
Yeah. And I think that you use some special kinds of oils and stuff. I know that you have issues of safety with your children having such easy access to your studio.
Yeah, I don't use solvents at all, except if I have a really dried out brush, I might use it to clean the brush. But otherwise, I just use walnut oil, and that's it. And they say it's like edible and completely harmless. So, and I've gotten used just to using the oil and painting wet on wet. And then once in a while, like now I've been using I think it's M. Graham who makes it. They also make a glazing medium with the walnut oil, and I've been using that for glazing. So it's all like really safe, non-toxic, no fumes.
So you're actually cleaning your brushes with the walnut oil as well. That's interesting. And how do you feel that it compares to like linseed, traditional linseed oils?
I love it. I like to work wet on wet, and they stay open a really long time. So I really like working with them.
Hmm.
They have like a little bit more fluidity to them, so I feel like a lot of the times I don't even add anything to the paint, so it's nice.
Hmm. And no solvents. You're not using any paint thinners or anything like that. So they probably have that's what gives them the really rich, oily, luscious kind of surface that you're getting.
I usually do my underpaintings just with golden acrylics, the fluid acrylics, and so I don't have to use any thin down oil paint for the underpaintings.
Hmm.
So
It's interesting that you said a little bit earlier about, just wanting to take pictures of the nature and going and being in it every day. I always say that, nature is the world's best composer. It's an expert at composition. And I think that your paintings, these new paintings, the composition that you get is giving. The one I'm thinking about in particular is the moss covered rock.
I can bring it down and show you.
Let's see it. But even with the bird's nest that's behind you, yeah, lovely. Beautiful.
Studio's so cramped.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so cramped right now.
But you have this way with your compositions of making a real icon out of these simple sort of elements of nature. A moss covered rock is not necessarily the most glamorous thing in the forest, but there's a certain aged loneliness and sage-like iconic feeling to the objects that you're focusing on. How do you know when you're walking around and when you're taking those images that this is the thing I'm gonna paint, this is the one?
I don't always know. I take so many images. There's usually things like on a hike that just catch my eye. Like it could be just a fallen log that's like going down a ravine in a certain angle that I'll have to photograph. And then, it might turn into something, but it might not. But I keep thinking about that log, and then, on other hikes, I might find something similar, and then that might become the painting eventually. And yeah, they get stuck in my head, these little visuals that I find in the woods. And my son the other day when we were hiking, he was just like, "What are you photographing? What are you taking a picture of?" I was like, "This log, isn't it great?" And he's just like, "Oh, I don't know."
I love these twigs. So do you find that like the visual language the visual conversation that you're having with yourself, basically you're finding a certain amount of repetition in something that is striking you, right? So this log is falling this way, you're thinking about it, and then you see more of them doing that same sort of action, and that starts to compound the decision that that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, like the mossy covered rock, we kept seeing these huge rocks up in the North Woods in Wisconsin by Crandon, where we like to go. There's also a little lake there that has, it's like the most perfect little hill that comes up in the middle. I've painted it a bunch of times with my Women in Canoe series. It's the most perfect little lake, and I'm so drawn to this hill that kind of comes up in the middle. So that's been repeated again and again. And then this rocks, these big monoliths that we see on hikes that I've just really been drawn on. The boys climb all over them, and it's just really, really neat. And then after painting those, I saw the Tom Utek show at MOA, and I was like, oh wow, he's drawn to the same type of things, and I was really, really inspired by that show.
Yeah, his work is amazing. We have a few pieces of his in the Miller Art Museum collection, and certainly we're open to having more in the future. I really like his. I'm a big fan of his work as well. So what's coming up for these paintings? What are you looking at immediately for your own personal artwork, not necessarily for the James May Gallery?
Um, yeah, I don't know. I think I just need to keep painting these landscapes and these waterscapes and see where they're going to lead. I've got another solo show in the fall, so whatever doesn't go to this show the next few weeks, we'll go to the fall show at Art Start in Rhinelander, and then before that, I'll have an artist residency. So I'm hoping to make one last really, really big painting. I keep thinking about making a really, really big, like 5 foot by 8 foot painting that is just the water that just sucks you in. I keep having this vision of doing that. And I've got the canvas down in the basement right now on another easel. I have another space in the basement that's a little bit larger I can work in, that I've been using for sewing and for stretching. And then I have the huge canvas down there that's scary right now.
A little intimidating. So you sew, you curate, you paint. What other art forms do you dabble in? Let's hear the list.
I grew up in the country, and I grew up doing 4-H. So through 4-H, I learned how to sew. I learned cake decorating. I learned baking. I learned so much, caring for animals, small animals, chickens, rabbits. I learned so much through that.
The art of husbandry, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's great. It sounds like there's a lot of positive things on the horizon, and you're learning to acclimate during this, strange period that we're in. I know to support emerging artists, and I, as a curator, am also, that's a big priority for me. And through these studio door interviews, one thing that I'm trying to find out from each of the people that I interview is, what advice do you have for these young artists? What do they do? How do they become career painters? How do they establish relationships with galleries that are going to work for them?
I think you can't just become an artist. I mean, you can't just want it. I mean, I feel like you have to have no other choice in the whole wide world, because I think it's one of the hardest things to go into. You're usually not making a lot of money. You're usually alone in your studio. I think it's a really hard thing for most people to do. And most people I went to school with are not still making art anymore. I would say it's probably like 5 to 10% of the people I went to school with. So I think you have to want it so bad, not have another choice, and just be tenacious about it and never give up on it. Yeah, I don't think it's an easy thing to choose.
Yeah, I always kind of felt like, as an artist, your entire career, you are creating your career from the beginning to end. That you're never necessarily, it's rare that people are like at this point in their career where this is it, this is what we're doing. You have to continue to find ways to make yourself relevant, put yourself out there. So it's almost, that's a big part of the job of being an artist.
Yeah, rejection, dealing with rejection constantly. That's another fun part.
I suppose we have that in common with actors and dancers and performers of all kinds. What advice do you have for emerging artists or people who want a career in the arts for approaching and establishing relationships with galleries?
Well, I think do your homework is the number one thing. Make sure the gallery is a good fit. Make sure they're representing artists that are similar to the art you're making, or that you would just fit well with the gallery. If you're close, like even within 2 hours, 3 hours, visit the gallery, show up, show your face, support the other artists that are showing there. I think it's huge to go to the openings, and I know exactly who comes and who doesn't. And if you're an hour away and never have showed up to my gallery, but then send me a portfolio. I'm like, huh, well, why haven't you ever stopped in, you know? Um, so I think definitely showing up, being present, which is hard for a lot of artists because they're usually introverted, but I think that, I mean, I don't know what people are doing now with COVID. I think all the art openings are pretty much not happening, so I think that's a little bit hard right now, but just stay connected and definitely just keep putting your art out there on social media. A lot of the artists I find, sometimes I just find randomly on Instagram. So I think it's so important just to have your work out there, have a website, have Instagram. I love looking at Instagram.
Me too. It's amazing the amount of art that's on Instagram. And one of the things in particular about Instagram that I like, and I bet you like too, is that it's so easy to access art on Instagram, and even other things like fashion and makeup tutorials and things like that are still being presented there's a competition to make them sophisticated and artistic. So it kind of brings art to people who would not necessarily go to a museum or gallery. So it's easy for them to, flip through Instagram, and not so easy for them to get dressed up and go to a museum, or they don't have interest in doing that. So
A lot more accessible.
a lot more accessible so I feel like art is kind of thriving at the moment, much in part due to social media and Instagram.
Yeah, it's weird. Like we've had more painting sales in the last few months than we have when the gallery's been open, just because of the increased presence online and on Artsy, Instagram, the stories we're doing. So then it's hard not to question like well, do we even need a brick and mortar gallery? But I still find value in putting work up on a white wall and being able to see it in context. That's hard to do online.
Absolutely. And I mean, the example I can give is the other day I went online and I took a virtual tour of Ramsey's tomb.
Oh, wow.
Amazing, because you can of course get zoom real close up to certain parts that you want to look at, and which you couldn't stick your face that close to it in real life. But it was an amazing hour that I spent in Ramsey's tomb virtually, but imagine the experience I would have had if I were being there. The atmosphere of experiencing art in person I don't think that virtual experience can ever replace that.
No, no.
Yeah. So you think you will when things open up a little bit, you're going to keep a brick and mortar?
I think so. And I didn't expect to love having a gallery so much and curating. I really, really love supporting artists. I love seeing things like magically come together. And yeah, and then especially when we had our living space next to the gallery, like going into the gallery anytime I wanted to, and just being able to take in that artwork, that was such an amazing experience to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're going to continue on with the brick and mortar, and I know you have a lot of challenges on your plate, and I'm really glad that you're painting. I love the ones with the figure, but boy, I really like these new paintings quite a lot. So anything else you want to add before I let you go?
No, I think that's great. I think it's good.
Well, super. Thank you so much for spending a little time. Thank you in particular for the advice to artists that are looking for a career, looking for ways to make relationships with galleries. And I really like that what you said in particular, that you have to do your homework, that you have to be building a relationship with this gallery to walk in the door and want something for them. It's a two-way street, the relationship with the gallery and the artist, and you really have to establish some foundation and know that this is a gallery that's interested in the type of work I'm making.
Right.
Right. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me today and participating in the studio door.
Oh, yeah.
Kendra, you take care.
Cool. Bye.
Bye.